Welcome back to another edition of the Sal Greco Show. Thanks for tuning in. If you get a chance, click the subscribe button, like, share what you see here. I mean, this is all for you guys. You know, I'm out here trying my best to bring the truth to you. The greatest mayor in New York City history and America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, and he was trying to attend these ridiculous protests that have been going on at Columbia University, where we see the pro-Palestinian students, aka anarchists, that are paid to be there and cause havoc, and they're going after, I guess, the Jewish students, and there's a whole mishegas in the street. There's been numerous arrests the last few nights and the last week in New York City at Columbia University, and there's a lot of debate about what's going on. While this was going on over the last few days, one of them being on the weekend, the nightlife mayor of New York City, the swagger man with no plan, Eric Adams, decides to go to Miami for 2 days, where he is out partying at the Clevelander and other places with the mayor of Miami, Mayor Suarez, and P. Diddy. They were hanging out in Miami because obviously if he's in New York City, partying at Concerfrito will bring too much attention. He was out in Miami and these protests broke out. It was all kinds of chaos out there in New York City, and he's partying to the break of dawn. So now there's protests continue. Columbia University president said that they're going to negotiate with these students, which I don't understand what that means, to see how long it's going to take till they stop protesting, meaning the rioters, the anarchists, the paid agitators, they have more time. They ask for more time to decide. Meanwhile, they're out causing chaos in the street and in the university on the ground. So they're protesting apparently, and Mayor Giuliani strolls in. And here's the video of what happens.
Today. Why? Because I do a show 8 o'clock tonight, and I'm going to put this on my show. That's why. Same reason you're here, pal.
Why are you not letting them talk to us?
Yeah, I push them away.
We got traffic, we got a big truck going behind us, so we got to get...
Why does the New York City Police Department want to cut off my right of free speech? You don't like what I'm saying, officer?
All right, we're going to come right here. We're coming.
The mayor? The mayor's in Miami.
Thank you. We don't want to...
Right here's good, all right.
The mayor talks to God, he talks to Jesus, and he's in Miami.
Am I good? Okay.
It's unbelievable that they are treating Rudy Giuliani the way they are. All they're doing is coming by. They want to show support, but they're not allowed. He's not allowed that free speech. This was disgraceful how they treated Rudy Giuliani. Rudy has every right to be there and at least talk to the people there. He's part of the A-Press too. He's an American citizen. Why he has to move his car and be berated by Community Affairs, which is, by the way, led by Inspector Perry, who is in her own investigation right now. And also there's a Deputy Commissioner, Mark Stewart, and Chief Tolentino. This little group has their own scandal because, by the way, they love to party at Concerfrito. We're going to go more into this entire culture of perversion, as I like to call it, in the NYPD and the Eric Adams administration. Predominantly the top part. As you know, in a prior episode, I mentioned how Eric Adams was sued by a woman that was a co-worker of his back in 1993 under the Adult Survivors Act, which was specifically designed for Donald Trump and his E. Jean Carroll case. They presented a case that said that he did something to this woman back in the late 80s, early 90s. So, of course, when it was about to expire, a female came out and said that Eric Adams had sexually assaulted her back in 1993 when they were both on the job. Now, later on, she actually updated her lawsuit, and in the court filings, you could see that she was saying that not only was it when they were part of the Transit Guardians, but that he had been in the car with her and there was some kind of, you know, he asked her to perform sexual acts on him. It was just a mess of the allegations that are there. Now, Eric Adams himself says we need to believe all women, but of course now he says he doesn't know this woman, but yet she has intricate details of the Transit Guardians, which was the group that Eric Adams was a part of. So he's calling this woman all kind. I don't know her. This isn't me. And then he has the city represent him, which is 100% illegal because as a member of the NYPD, as a city employee, under General Municipal Law 50K2, you have to request that the city law department actually represent you, and then they will send a letter back stating whether they are or they aren't and the reason why, without getting into attorney-client privilege stuff, we'll say. But that's not what Eric Adams is letting his law department say. And we'll just put it like this. The woman that's now in charge of it was just notified through the media that she's going to be fired by Eric Adams. Why? Because she had a squabble with him, apparently, basically telling him what I was telling everybody since the beginning. And I put a FOIA request on this letter, and they denied me. They said, oh, there's nothing to see. Attorney-client privilege. But that's not true. You know why? I myself was sued one time, and I had to apply for my representation through the law department, and they gave me a letter, and anybody could actually see this. And in this letter, it stated why I was represented. So this letter they have to give a reason why, because on 50K2, there's 3 ways that they cannot indemnify you for something. Number 1, if it doesn't fall in the scope of your duties. I don't think sexually harassing someone, sexually assaulting someone, raping somebody would be part of the scope of a police officer's duty, let alone a city employee. 2, does these actions benefit your job? No, it doesn't. I don't see any benefit of doing any crime. It's actually a criminal act. And 3, it's prohibited conduct. This is not something that you can indemnify or represent someone for. These are all facts. But somehow, now it's spread not only to Eric Adams, but friends of Eric Adams. Friends of his that work in an administration, such as Timothy Pearson. It's a culture of perversion. I think it just spreads to many different departments all over the place in the United States. California police officer was accused of domestic violence. He still rose to be chief. Here's Amanda Carley to the left, and daughter Madison Carley near their home in Fontana. She's about to come on and tell you all about her story. And here it says, when Judge Janine B. Nadell calls a courtroom to order Friday morning, the benches will be filled with prominent local women. They say they plan to show up at a Mendocino County Superior Court to support one of their own, a former county worker who sued the police chief, her one-time fiance, alleging that he abused her. The case stretches back more than a decade, a time during which Noble Wadelich rose through the ranks of the Ukiah Police Department. I hope I'm saying that right. The patrol officer, the detective, the sergeant, lieutenant captain, and eventually chief. Amanda Carley was there for 1 promotion and 2 of his Officer of the Year commendations, and a time when she alleges he smashed dishes on the floor in anger, slammed her against bookshelves and a refrigerator, swerved their car into an oncoming traffic. She packed her things and moved the children out of the house they owned together in 2015. She walked away from her job and sued her alleged abuser and the county in 2017. All the while, Wadelich continued to rise in the department. How the hell did that happen? On Friday, Nadell will decide whether Carley's case can go to trial. This is more troubling stuff, you know, and, you know, I think that this seems to be a pattern that you see all over the place. I remember me in the job. When I was on the job, you'd be hearing stories, but this is different. This one's different. So without any further ado, let's welcome Amanda Carley to the Sal Greco Show. I wanted you to talk a little bit, not only about yourself and introduce yourself to the audience, but because you were a former police officer out in California, and I read a little bit of your story. I mentioned a little bit about it, but I think it's better if it comes out of your mouth. So why don't you tell us about yourself, where you came from, you know, your background, and how you even got involved in law enforcement?
Sure. So 2006, I started working for the Mendocino County District Attorney's Office. I worked in the victim witness unit with victims of sexual assault under the age of 18. It was a special grant. So there, you know, I was in court all the time, had great relationships with the attorneys and judges and everybody, and the police officers and detectives and deputies. And once I hit, I feel like, kind of maxed out my potential there. It was 6 years of sitting in court. It was fun. It was great. But I wanted to have more of an impact on the front end, you know, getting the cases to where they are, that then, you know, like the first part of it, I was really interested in just kind of exploring that. So at the time I was dating a detective for the Ukiah Police Department. I worked for the county, so very rural and small. Not a lot of, I mean, in the city, there's the one, you know, police department and then the sheriff's department. But in the entire county, really, there was one other little police department. So I was very limited. I, you know, couldn't go to work for the city and go that route. I already worked for the county. So I just lateraled over, and then I became the PRCS officer, or it's like the local parole for California. Over the sex offenders and the mental health. So all of them had been sentenced and released from prison of some sort, or local jail. Anyways, so I was always in the field. I was never a court officer. So from day one, I just transitioned from helping the victims of these creeps, right, to then supervising them. So, and with being in a small county, I was able to do a lot of stuff that I think a lot of agencies don't get to do. So, you know, going on search warrants with the task force. I was, you know, always doing some kind of search warrant with COMET, which was the marijuana eradication team. Department of Justice, you know, we had a CHP officer, deputy. We had a fish cop, or like, wildlife, I don't know what they call them, but we called them fish cops. One of every type, somebody from the police department, and this whole kind of multitask agency, you know, task force. And so I got to do that stuff, a lot of really cool stuff. And then after everything that happened that we'll talk about, I ended up coming to Southern California. I worked as a tribal police officer until my backgrounds with the state of California completed, which was about 2 years. And 2 years because of everything that I had been through up until that point. I was hired by the state of California as a criminal investigator located in Orange County. It's just, it happens to be that after everything I had been through, I, you know, made this thing happen. It was like my dream job. And then I realized I was no longer interested, that I was very bitter and mistrusting of my coworkers and just the field in general. I think, you know, the wounds were a little too fresh, and it's probably, you know, not a good idea to push myself that fast into another role that reminded me of where I came from. So I decided to hang it up in 2020. There was always some thought in my mind that I wasn't going to stay on very long, but I needed to accomplish the goal to prove that I could. So I did, and left in 2020, and I haven't looked back since. So
in 2020, that was around the time when they were rioting every day in every street, in every county, in every city. So did you have to get involved in any of that, or they didn't make you kind of got away with not having to get involved in any of those riots?
I left right before the actual, like, the chaos began. It was sort of still, everything was quiet because of COVID and nobody knew what to do with it, you know, and I feel like I did not have to deal with any of that, but I saw the writing on the wall. I saw, you know, there was talk about the whole immunity and taking that away and the protection. You know, back in the day, it used to be as long as you were within policy and procedure, that you stayed within that and you acted with integrity and honesty, you were going to be good and your department would back you up, right? Just like the academy, you know, everything is taught to you is that just stay within policy, do the right thing. As long as you can articulate it in your report, you'll be good. And then I saw that completely went out the window. And I'm thinking, not only now is my department not going to have my back, because we know this to be true, but also I could be thrown in jail for just doing my job, so that I want, you know, to ensure that I'm going home at the end of the day. I'm like, it's just not worth it anymore. And it wasn't.
You weren't there for the aftermath of first the riots, which had to do with the George Floyd incident, which in New York City and I think other jurisdictions, they brought the diaphragm law. So you're not allowed to put your knee on somebody's back. So basically a basic MMA move to try to control the perpetrator or whoever you have on the ground. You can't do it anymore. So you might need 4 guys to try to tackle one guy who's fighting everybody tooth and nail. And then there was the forced vaccination shot, or can't say that. We'll say the forced mandates on people that you had to either take something that you didn't want to take or take it and you roll the dice. So you went through all of, you kind of missed that. You just missed that, how that whole thing changed the police department. So then I guess on your way, in your experience though, like I was telling the audience, I saw the article that said you had a lawsuit against another officer. You were part of a whole domestic violence case. And I actually saw you on another show where you got into, like, it was pretty detailed. I might add that in later on and give a link to that, because it was about 2.5 hours, and just hearing it just makes my head was spinning, because I've kind of seen that situation in a New York City Police Department where you hear stories like this that I'm not directly involved, or I don't directly am involved in it, or people I know, but you hear about things. So can you get into a little bit, or you want to get into the whole story of how you became a victim, you had to survive all of that, and how the job and the upper echelon there treated you? Yeah,
and it's interesting because I hear all the time the questions, and I'm like, I feel like for sure people have a right to ask, and they're curious, how can you be a female in a profession that requires you to be confident and hold your ground, deal with these guys? I mean, the majority of them are guys, so I'll just refer to them. They're guys, and they're big, and they're strong, and they're criminals, and they have nothing to lose. And I'm here as a female. People assume I am a certain way because of the way I look. So people are like, how did you fall for that? And to me, it's like so clear, but it's hindsight, and it's from the personal experience. It's that I'm human. And I think that there's this idea, right? There's this thought that you are not human once you put on the uniform and the badge. And we have troubles and issues and relationship issues, and we are not immune from any of it. In fact, we're actually more susceptible to these things because of the people we associate with, the life we live, the hours we work, the things you see, the shit you get put through on a daily basis. So you're more apt to be in these situations. So so basically my situation is a little bit different, I think, because my ex was just a master manipulator. He used some very personal things about my childhood against me, and kind of triangulated like a therapist that we were seeing. So I really did try to head off and like stop the cycle of violence, if you will, from continuing, but slowly. But not to cut you off, but you trusted him because he was a coworker. You knew him from when you worked in the DA's office, so you saw him he's a cop. You trust right? Police. Didn't you think that's a safe bet? Yeah, right? So that's what I'm saying. Before if anybody has, they're watching this or listening to this, and they say, "Oh," I'm going to say, "Well, you don't understand. Amanda was working as a counselor. She's in a DA's office. She's friends with a lot of cops that come in very friendly, and this gentleman was no different. So why wouldn't she trust the guy? If you say she's naive, or why'd you do this, or why not do that, you got to understand that she had a working relationship, became a friendship, and then it turned into something else. But there's nothing wrong or illegal about it. She just happened to trust somebody who was also on the job. He's a cop, and she believes she could trust him. So I just want to get that out there before anybody jumps the hurdle there and says, "Oh, you're naive," or something. Yeah, and you know what? There are so many things looking back now, obviously, that I would have done different. I would change, or I would tell people to do if they were in my situation. But that's all great. It's just but post the experience. So that's why hindsight is what it is. We make mistakes to learn. then we hope, you know, to not repeat them and then have a better life. But you think about humans, that's how do we learn? We make mistakes. We live life, and we hope that they're not big enough mistakes that you can't recover. But by time, exactly what you said, by time I realized the situation I was in, coupled with the other things that, you know, I believed about myself, it was not hard to fall into that trap. But also show up every day to work and do my job. You get really good at covering and masking like what's going on, you know, and you have to be like that already if you're going to be in law enforcement. And I feel like for females also, you have to really like learn to put on that face, because if you cry, you get teary, your voice cracks, people are going to eat you up.
Unless you're in the circle of perversion there that they have in the upper echelon, where they get away with this, you know, the stuff that they get away with. Like I've referenced before how, you know, I worked at NYPD, and we have these clowns that are up there now. They're named in multiple lawsuits, sexual harassment, rape, all this crazy stuff. But yet, you know, it's like they keep getting away with. So I'm saying with you can't, you know, that circle, only those people get taken care of, because that's the corruption part. And I've heard even Mayor Giuliani at one point, former Mayor of New York, Giuliani, says New York City's default position is corruption. And it also stems in the police department, because I say police departments are the mini political offices. Like, you know how politicians are? That's a mini political office, each one of these police departments. And you're basically a victim of how this all worked. Because when I read just a little bit of the story, and I felt, and I see that they see you. Here's this young, good-looking girl. She's blonde. She's 5'9". She's a counselor in the DA's office. So they see you as what I used to hear these guys calling the NYPD fresh meat. They're gonna reel you in, right? They want to reel you in, and then they want to. I don't know how you want to say this. They want one guy and the next guy. They're all jealous. They all want you. And the next thing you know, here comes 2 years later, 1 year later, here comes the newest recruit. Oh, we got to go after, you know, whatever her name is. And you're old news. You're yesterday's news, and then you're gone. And then they'll call you every name in the book behind your back. They'll put your name in a bathroom stall that you've been with Johnny, with Joe, with James, all these different people, and that's it. Your career is over. And then whatever happens to you from that point on, she's crazy. She's a quote-unquote emotionally disturbed person. I mean, I've seen this scenario. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, it's classic. Yep. That's it. And when you don't do it, if you don't fall for this, you know, the scheme that the guys are, you don't fall, basically you don't do what they are wanting you to do. You don't sleep with them or whatever else they want to do. Then you're that girl who's, you know, you're a bitch. If you do it, then you're the, I don't know the words. I don't even have the words, but yeah. So the Badge Bunny times the other dirty words, you know? So you're really, as a female, you're really screwed. Either way, you literally have to pick a side. And for me, I wasn't going to go down. I picked the side that I thought obviously was going to be the most professional and more reflective of who I am as a person. I didn't do anything with anybody in my department ever in all of my years. But that also came with a big price, like you said. And I was very clear, it was made very clear to me that if I had done those things, I would have been protected or taken care of, and would have probably avoided a lot of issues. So that was very clear to me, and I knew that. But I had to choose. That's just how you go down the dark side, though, you know? It's just, you go down that road and you don't come back.
And now that's why I want to get in a little bit into this, what actually happened here, because you started, you know, dating this guy who was a detective in the other department, and then you ended up together. He moved in with you, and then I remember hearing that and then this other guy that actually was your coworker, another gentleman that knew him, another cop, then filed a complaint. And you didn't even go through with it because you knew that these guys all knew each other. And it's a circle of nepotism where they're all in cahoots with each other. And if you make a claim, you feel that not only is it not going to be heard, they're going to come after you. So even if you scream, where does the allegation go? Because now you spend all this time in the department, whatever happened, whatever, because, I mean, you came to work with a black guy. I mean, nobody said she's getting beat up by the guy we know, that detective who somehow became a chief. How did that all go down? Like, he's getting away with this behavior because of the position he's in and the people he knows, but yet you keep going to work with these marks. I don't understand. Nobody stepped in and tried to do the right thing, or did somebody try and get shut down? I mean, this guy, this other gentleman that's involved in this too, that did something, but it wasn't anything. It was really just the, circle of nepotism there. Yeah.
So that's exactly how the first set, the foundation was laid, was that, the allegations were starting to come out. So they were, the guys, including the guy you're talking about, Jason, they were at a training and they were all drinking, and they don't drink. They don't just casually drink, right? So we know they're partying, and he just is an idiot, and everybody knows it's an established reputation that he has. Then and now, he just started basically throwing out there, hey, your girl Amanda, talking to the Ukiah Police Department officers that were there. So they had just been promoted to sergeant. This was a supervisor training. Crazy enough, all of these people are newly promoted supervisors and should know better. How they got there, who knows? He just starts throwing out there, hey, your guys' prize detective over here is beating Amanda, and one of the guys that was there, newly promoted sergeant, did go back to his department, and I don't know the context. Nobody would ever talk to me after that. I don't know if he went concerned. He was very good friends with my abuser, Noble. Very, very good friends. I would say almost best friends. So my gut says that he went to say, hey, FYI, this dude's over here, right, yapping his mouth. This is going to get out and this is going to be trouble. Either way, he did report it. He is the only person in my entire story that actually reported it separate and, apart from like a socialization situation. He went to his department. How that went down and what they said, I don't know. But that's when they sent a detective, or no, I should say a private investigator they hired, because the counties are so small, there's no IA, there's no department that does these things. And the departments are so small. So that's part of this, is there's no oversight. The people who are running the department are the ones also making the decisions about their right-hand men, about what kind of consequences, if they have IAs. They don't even do IAs. I was told my IA was the first that my department, that anybody could even recall. And that maybe it was just a butcher job because they didn't know what they were doing, but sorry, that was my life. I don't care if it was a butcher job or not, You could have, there was 100 things that could have been done better.
This whole thing, it just sounds crazy. But all I'm saying, without interrupting you, but there's no internal affairs. You don't have no outlet other than the very persons that are in charge that, he's partying with these guys or whatever. He's friend. So where do you go to say, I'm getting abused? Or I guess his best friend tried to say, but who's he going to go to? They're all friends, and he's obviously I guess when you became your fiance, he's going to find out that somebody did that. So then this could become a mess. Like, I don't understand what the hell.
And that's part of it, is because when a department's so small and it's insulated, there's no oversight. And nobody is there nobody with any kind of balls is going to sit there and call their coworker out, right? Because then what happens to them? They get singled out and thrown in the trash. And that's the thing, is that these departments there's no mandate to farm out these investigations, or there's nobody overseeing these departments. They do what they want. They fly under the radar, and they bank on the fact that somebody like me was not going to stand up and say something. And after everything that I went through, I absolutely could understand. I would still do it over 100 times though. But I can see how initially it is so uncomfortable. I sacrificed every part of my life. I will never be the same person. I will never, ever look at the world the same. My profession, they ruined it for me. My career, you know, everything. Every hope, everything I'd worked for, and I worked so hard, they stripped it all from me. So I lost my house, my car, my retirement. I had to get a roommate. I was like my mid-30s. It was super embarrassing. I had no money. My department, I tried to go to them when I had left, and I was like, I'm broke. I need to work some overtime at juvenile hall or anywhere. Refused. And I actually have emails from coworkers that were so upset because they knew what I was going through. And they're like, not only are you sabotaging her and like they're the cause of these issues, but then nobody recognized or was willing to stand up and say, hey, everybody else gets to work overtime at juvenile hall. And you know what I mean? Of all people, I felt like I needed it. There wasn't a single person willing to stand up and say anything.
Yeah, that's very troubling. If you have no outlet, then you get blackballed all because his friend actually tried to do the right thing or whatever he's trying to do, and then it gets back to these people. Then they hire private eyes instead of, because there's no department. I mean, it's like you're just answering to yourself. So it's basically they do whatever they want, say whatever they want, get away with whatever they want. Other than if they mess with a politician, I think then it'd be a little different. But as long as they don't go past that barrier, whatever they do goes under the radar and nobody ever hears about it.
And the district attorney's office and the DA himself, unfortunately, he is kind of the ringmaster of all of this and the most corrupt out of everybody because he has so much power. DAs, I don't think people realize how much power they have, and immunity and discretionary, decision making as far as charging. They don't have to say why. They don't have to give an explanation. The DA who chose to ignore the fact that I was being beaten for years, endorsed punishing me and putting me or threatening to put me on a Brady list, knowing that this guy was abusing me, arresting people, testifying against him, putting people away in prison for things that he did. His conduct was way worse. And the DA knew it, and I have proof of that, right? And the DA just took his side. He did not like me. And I was told that chances are he is an abuser just like my ex. It takes one to know one kind of thing. Very much, you cannot know what happened to me and not feel like you need justice to be served. The fact that the DA didn't do anything shows, to me at least, because I know what my life was like and what I suffered through, is absolutely ridiculous. 100 times worse what he did and his abuse of power and how it affected my and my children's life than being beaten by this ogre. Just this ogre of a man who was 3 times my size and had no problem beating me for years. The DA, it was single-handedly what my department and the DA did was way worse. And
I think you were brave even coming forward, because then I showed the article, so you came forward everything, but then did anything change with that, or was it just they kind of like were able to squash that or quell the questions from the media? Because it really depends. Some of the media does what they're supposed to do in something like this, and then in other retrospects they just kind of be like, oh well, it doesn't matter, it's not a story, or I don't know. They're afraid to ask any questions because they think that then they're not going to give them an inside scoop on. Listen, if they don't like people, they're not going to tell you anything either. There's no inside scoop. Those days are over. The NYPD does this very well. And in New York, it's kind of like with Eric Adams. They're afraid sometimes to ask him what this, even no matter what kind of corrupt thing is going on around them, they don't seem to ask him the really heavy question that everybody wants the media to ask him because they're afraid. Right. Well, and in my situation, the district attorney, his name's David Eister. He has complete control of everything that happens in that town. So he has... and which town is it? Ukiah, a little town, Northern California. So his former press, I should know the title, his media spokesperson that worked for him for 10 years, they ended up having a falling out,
We then connected and became close. So now he was like, all the things you were saying, I worked there. And yeah, I didn't stand up. It was his job and whatever. When they had a falling out, now he was coming to me, writing, like offering to help get my story out. But all of this was so many years down the road, it didn't help me. But I went to every media source. I'm telling you, if you looked at the emails outside of town, big cities, I tried, because I'm like, there is no way that the real world, right, outside of this little cocoon of a world, would be okay with this happening. Because as much as I was a victim and in that mindset, I knew what they were doing was so wrong. Just inherently, I just knew it was wrong. And I was like, if I can get the attention, they're going to stop this. They're going to step in and help me. And he had paid. So the DA has on staff the only newspaper that's local. There was one, and he had somebody that his person was connected. So basically, he paid to make sure nothing negative was said about him. They refused to talk to me. They wouldn't acknowledge me. And then, of course, later down the road, my attorney, when I filed the civil suit, everybody was like, you can't talk to the media because your case is pending. And that was the single-handed worst thing I ever did, was listen to my attorney in that sense, because he didn't even realize at the time how corrupt this little town was. He didn't even realize, the length that the DA and everybody would go to keep this thing quiet. And so nobody at the media nobody would talk, and they wouldn't even call me back. And then it's interesting because my coworkers who knew what was happening, as soon as the allegations came out the second time, because my daughter is the one who reported it, you would think that it would support the fact that I am not lying, right? Because my 13-year-old daughter broke down, had a complete meltdown, and told what happened. And she had witnessed some of it. My son had witnessed it. A lot of people had witnessed it, but nobody would question them. So you would think that I'd had some credibility there, but instead my coworkers treated me like I was the plague. And I mean, I got text messages sent to me that said, and I still have them somewhere, like basically, don't talk to Amanda because she's in trouble with the DA and you may get called to testify. And the DA is immune, and there's no reason, immune for prosecution or from any kind of trouble, actually. And that there's no reason to talk to me because everybody was afraid I was going to pull them into it. But it's just crazy looking back. I was literally having my face beaten, right? And to the point where my daughter goes to a school counselor and says, I don't think my mom's going to make it. I need somebody to help her. And my coworkers, all they cared about was whether they'd be drug into question. And all they'd have to do is tell what they saw. Have you seen Amanda with a black eye? Yes. There was nothing that they were going to give that was going to compromise their safety, their job. But I'm telling you, to this day, there are people who still treat me like I'm the plague because I stood up for myself.
I'll tell you another thing, too. I'm getting like agitated hearing this because I feel like I'm back in the NYPD. Cops live in a bubble. They live in a bubble, and I could tell you this because the NYPD attacked the media, and they talk down the way they're talking to certain journalists, trying to, it's completely unprofessional, and it's the chief of patrol doing this, and the deputy commissioner of operations, and the mayor says it's okay. I feel so they're attacking these people, and they live in a bubble, and in that bubble, you know how it is. People go out, and the cops they'll sit down at a place, and they talk to each other and go, that guy, I don't like him. He sounds like a latte-loving guy. And then they talk amongst themselves like that, but don't go public with it because cops get frustrated. But they live in this bubble, and in that bubble, they'll say that if you get in trouble, it happened to me. I wasn't even in trouble. They try to frame me for things I never did, but they say, okay, well, Sal's in trouble. Don't talk to him. And that's what they did to you. Oh, she's in trouble. If you talk to her, you're going down.
Yeah, if you're seen talking to her, you might be like her. Somebody might judge you. And I'm like...
You lose your job. You're going to get suspended. All this crazy stuff that they... And you know what? I might be victim of saying and doing that myself because when you're in that culture, that's what happens. You're in that bubble. But now that you're outside the bubble, and that's why I'm talking here with Amanda, so people can understand... if that you're doing that, I'm telling you right now, the best thing to do when something happens, you go public. And you know something? Get out of that bubble, because this little bubble is this small compared to the rest of the world. Nobody wants to hear this kind of stuff. If you think, if let's say this is a normal job, anything normal, do you think it's okay that somebody goes to their job every day with their face looks like they just got into a boxing match with Mike Tyson in the 80s, and you think that nobody, don't talk to her, you think that's normal? No, that's a police thing, as they live in a bubble. And I don't think, and people need to, if you see something like that, I would hope after hearing this, or you either watching this or listening to this, you say something or do something, because it doesn't take much to do the right thing. And if you're a real man, like people, these guys, I'm a macho, I'm a cop, if you're a real man, be a man. Because that is, you know, first rule as a man, you don't hit a woman. If I don't care if it's your best friend doing it, you better stop him. You better say something. It's not right. It's just, I don't like to intrude in other people's business, but hitting somebody, hitting a woman is beneath. It's just one of the worst things you could do. I believe that God says, here's a woman is like a gift to a man. You're a companion, and then you're going to beat them senseless. And I can only imagine if, you know, you would come home and you're waiting for your fiance, and he comes to the door and he just starts hitting you because you had a bad day. Because I understand that job it's borderline. It could go either way. It's a hard life. You see the worst things, but he should never come home and do that. It should actually be the opposite. Say, hey, hon, I've had a bad day. This happened. You know, now I'm home, and thank God I'm with my fiance, going to be my wife. And like now he should be this way, coming down. Instead, he was going up. And that's where she was. I just want people to realize this. I don't know how this went on for this long, and no help. This DA guy has a media guy. This is crazy. This is stuff that you would. Oh,
it's unbelievable. People hear it and they're like, there's no way this just happened a few years ago. And it absolutely happened. And it's still happening. I have people hitting me up from my old department who were like, same thing though. Well, I don't want to say anything because it could affect my current job, right? So I've moved on and I'm in law enforcement and I don't want it to follow me. And trust me, I get it. I sued the DA in federal court, you know, myself and the firm. It was not a comfortable place to be, but when you know you're a good person and you've done the right things and you don't deserve what happened, and then you see the corruption. You see the corruption that the public doesn't see, and you see it daily, but then you see it in the context, like the different ways the corruption, whether it's the victims of a case that gets screwed and they don't realize it because the cop, you know, messed up and somebody's covering for him, but yet they'll say, oh, well, the case wasn't so strong because, you know, your daughter is 4. And there's so many excuses and things that happen. These cases get pissed away or they cover for each other. And it's so infuriating.
There's no accountability. That's what it is. You don't see a lot of it in the world, and regardless of anything you see, it doesn't matter whether it's political, in the sports world, and in the private sector, and law enforcement. Nobody's ever held accountable. It's just, you see, it's like the hardest thing for anyone to do is just say, this guy was wrong, or yeah, you know, I work with this guy, but he's wrong, or this guy committed a crime. Yes, I might have been a friend of his, but he's guilty. He's wrong. They don't do that.
And for a profession that is based on ethics and honesty and doing the right thing, right? That's my favorite word. Everything is like allegedly, because the truth is that the things I saw came from the most corrupt, insensitive, callous, unethical humans. So it made me question everything. And it's not that I hate cops. I don't hate law enforcement. Hate's not even the word. I am not going to ever stay quiet about a situation that was so wrong when I know it's happening. And it's happening, and it's being allowed to happen because there's this shield of silence, because people think if this badge and this uniform fits on this man and he's so nice to you that there's no way that he could be this person. And we as a society know that we have to do better. We have to know that when a person goes in their home, they are a different person a lot of times than they are what you see in the public. If Noble had been the person he was to me, to the public, or to anybody outside of the home, he would not have been able to keep his career. And his career was based on this like illusion of what he wanted people to think. And they absolutely, to this day, there are people who I guarantee will stand by him. I was called on social media, you know, like the Johnny Depp trial was going on kind of around the same time that my trial was supposed to be set. I was called Amber Heard by people who did not know, and then also by people who were very close to my family who absolutely knew it happened, and they still did it because it was like the cool thing to do, right? And my thing is nobody knows, so just don't make a judgment. Like, just don't take a side. Hey, I don't know what happens behind closed doors. I know this person's a good person. It seems like this person's a good person. It is what it is, but, you know.
I even say this now with there's things going on. I see things going on in social media and in the news and stuff. I might lean one way or the other, but that depends on where evidence of something leads. I'm still a cop. No matter what I do, it's always in our DNA and our blood. You go where evidence goes. So you come to, I can't get over, you're coming to work every day. You come to work every day. Your face is blown up. There's marks all over you. How is nobody being held accountable? Because now this guy Noble, did he not get promoted despite having these allegations that are chasing him around everywhere, coming from you, and you're waving a white flag, a red flag, a black flag? Hey, look at, I mean, I got abused. You know that now at this point, not even with this guy, he's getting promoted all these. How did that happen? How is he being promoted? Yet everybody, it's like like now at this point, it becomes an underground thing where, yeah, he beat her up, but, you know, we're going to promote him anyway. Like that, I know how that, that's how the culture is. It's sick. It's sick, but that's what's clearly what happened here.
I was told actually it might have been a strategic move to promote him because getting him off of the line in the sense that like the everyday patrol, I mean, he wasn't doing patrol, but he was a detective, so he's very active in these cases. And it was kind of sold to me. And I think it was like a means to keep me quiet. Was like, well, if he is an abuser, it would probably be in everybody's best interest if he had less contact with the public. So I was like, stupid. Okay. Not that I had any control over it, but I was placed on leave and put through an IA. It was an absolute nightmare. And then as I'm off work, it's paid leave, but still, it's like anybody who's been through an IA knows it's the worst point of your life. I was off on the IA for being a victim of his abuse, and he got promoted to sergeant.
Yeah, see, I have a problem with this because here it is. You know, my police department, NYPD, if this would happen, what they would do is you would be probably suspended. It might be administratively, or then they bring you back. You have no gun and no shield. You sit on the desk. You're not allowed to have overtime. Or they charge you, which is the same thing. You're suspended pending your criminal trial. This never happened here. What I'm hearing here is that they actually came after you to try to put you on the desk that he should have been administratively, to say, I'm going to promote somebody for, I guess, abusing someone else. That is, I don't know. I think the whole upper management there needs to be fired, investigated. You need to flip the whole department up there upside down. Not the guys in the street, but the guys up top, and say, how did you allow this? So your idea here, what I'm hearing here is, I'm promoting you based on the fact that you beat the hell out of someone else, and I'm going to put that person administratively out. But you, I'm going to promote you to keep you off the street instead of suspending you and charging you, which is what should have happened here. You understand? And then I guess he got promoted again and again and again.
So funny thing is, besides the fact that they promoted him, they never even investigated him. So he never had to go through any kind of an interview, an investigation. You know, normally you can't be compelled to incriminate yourself as a police officer, as like a citizen, right? But then in an administrative hearing, you're or your command staff or your chief can absolutely and should absolutely, you know, there's like segregated interviews, and you should be compelled to have to give a statement. There's a term for it, and I always forget. And it's an administrative, so it's not you're necessarily incriminating yourself criminally, but administratively, that there should be an investigation for anything like this that happens, especially domestic violence, with proof, with a child coming forward. With my ex-husband, our therapist, full on text messages from him for 30 pages talking about the abuse. There was no doubt, and I'm told that even the DA, there's never been a doubt that it happened. It's just, what are we going to do to cover it up, make her go away, because she's the weak link, and she's the one that could raise some, you know, eyebrows here if she really wants to talk, and then bring a focus to these departments and all this corruption. So he gets zero interrogation. In fact, the detective, Andrew Porter, sent a text message to Noble, and that's in the report. It's 2 lines, and it says, I text messaged him asking him to come in for an interview based on the allegations. He responded, my attorney has been retained. My department has retained an attorney. You'll have to go through them. So my question is, I was denied any kind of a work, you know, like the POBAR kind of attorney for me, because they said, it's not a work-related incident. And I'm like, no shit, of course it's not. Why am I being investigated from my job? Why is my job stepping in? But he was given a really good attorney by his department. But yet I'm the victim, he's the criminal. They retain a hell of a firm for him. And I got turned down. I got a letter in the mail saying, you don't qualify, sorry, you've paid into this, but it's not work related. And I'm thinking, does that not prove my point? That my department should not be taking any action against me. In fact, the supervisor that was, you know, just like frivolously throwing around my business, that domestic violence is very serious, right? That could have got me killed. It should have. I mean, because this guy now knows that people are telling. He has nothing to lose at that point. If he knew his department was legitimate, and if he thought there were going to be consequences, he would have taken that out on me. But he didn't do anything except joke about it because he knew they wouldn't do anything. So that supervisor should have been the one in an IA and should have been punished and demoted, because how are you going to have a supervisor at a training plastered, shit-faced drunk, talking about me being abused while I'm at home with this guy, right? You know, people calling him, text messaging. I was put in so many uncomfortable and unsafe situations at the hand of my own coworkers and department. It blows my mind.
And not only that, I mean, here's the other thing I'm thinking. Was there ever anybody said she needs an order of protection from this guy or your daughter too? This
is something that I have been waiting to talk about, actually. Nobody has asked me this. And in the beginning, I thought, well, I don't want to be a victim, because I didn't want to be. I didn't want to have my face bashed in. I didn't want to hook up with a guy and like buy a house with him and start a life with him, come to find out he's an absolute asshole, right? Like, I didn't know that, or otherwise I wouldn't have gone down that road. And so I knew I could take care of myself, or I thought I could, but clearly my daughter and my son didn't feel safe. When I left that first interview and told them a portion of what had happened to me, nobody, the detective, and he's a friend of mine, or was, I thought, nobody even mentioned a protective order. It literally was not even on the table. It wasn't even an option. And I wasn't going to ask for it, because here I'm like...
That's criminal, and I'll tell you why. In my department, I'm pretty sure it's like this everywhere. Even if you kick and scream, say, I don't want to do anything to my fiance, whatever, you have to put in that order of protection, not only for yourself, but your kids who are sitting there saying, I am scared to death of this guy. That right there, if that's a statement somewhere, no matter how old they are, you have to do it. So this guy should be terminated. Forget about terminated. He's not a cop. He's covering for his friend. That's what it is.
Especially when my daughter was so young and had been the one to tell. So that was my thing. The first interview I went in voluntarily. I didn't have to, I'm not compelled, I'm not obligated to give a statement, but as a mom, I felt the duty because my daughter did something that her grown mom and all of these grown-ups who knew what was going on, my daughter did the mature and the adult thing at 13 that none of these people could do, which was do the right thing and speak up and ask for help. I mean, if you put that, just that alone makes me so angry because of what she had to do and then what she had to go through, because he was never prosecuted, he was never investigated, never put out on leave. So by all appearances, he's not guilty. She made it up. So that's what really brought out the fire and made me actually find my voice. Which, you know, I tell her all the time how sorry I am, both of my kids, my son and my daughter. But, you know, that part, that just gets me. Nobody offered, how about a civil standby? How about maybe not the protective order, because they'll say, well, the last incident was a couple weeks ago, or, you know, here you are sitting and you've survived it, so we don't want to deal with a protective order, whatever the issue is. But what about offering a civil standby while I have to go vacate my house? Because Child Protective Services, if they think I'm staying with him and I don't vacate my home right away, they're going to take the kids because they think that I'm not going to leave them, right? Because typical domestic violence, they have to force women to leave and get distance. That's the only way you can actually start to realize what's happened to you, right? That is absolutely the only way a domestic violence victim is ever going to come to terms and get better, if you will, and get help, is to get distance and time, and that must be forced. So a civil standby would have just been, it could have even just been like, not even formal, an informal, hey, I'm going to go up there, I'm going to stand by. Instead, it was like, all right, let us know when you want to come back for the rest of your interview. And I went home and had to pack whatever I could pack and take and leave. And I had already lost everything, right? I was so embarrassed that day. I remember I asked, my son actually stayed home from school and he was in high school at that point. And I asked one of his friends, he stayed home from school. Those two boys helped me move whatever we couldn't take, which wasn't much. I couldn't take much. I had to leave. And I just think back, I was so embarrassed and I was so distraught at what was happening to me and to us, right? So I'm ripping up my family. I mean, there were so many things going through my mind, and nobody offered to help. Not a single person. And it's just, looking back, I wish I could have done so many things differently, but, you know, it's the benefit of hindsight.
I feel for you. I'm like, you know, I'm on your side. I think this is insane. So I just wanted, because I wanted to segue into something else, because you mentioned something else. But before I do that, I wanted to, so what was the end result of it? Because you sued, and I mean, this guy made it to chief. So people are going to want to hear, how did this all end? Because you told me something, how it ended a little bit. I was like, wow. So why don't you tell the audience how this all ended at your lawsuit and everything?
So I got through the IA and I was cleared, but that took a lot of tears and like frustration and me holding the county accountable. So they dropped the attempts to punish me, and then I stayed on. They never returned my gun though. So they forced me to go in the field and do my job, and took my gun, my ability to protect myself and go home to my children. That's the only purpose of that gun. Anyways, long story short, they never returned it to me, but I was still good enough to go out and do the work and arrest people and supervise these parolees, these very, you know, violent offenders. But I just didn't have the right to go home safe, right? Like, protect myself. So I stayed and I went to work every single day without my gun as long as I could. And then eventually my son was going to the Marine Corps. My daughter's like, I can't stand this anymore. She had been bullied, you know, on and on. We picked up our stuff and we left and came to Southern California. So a firm had contacted me and said, we heard through some judges that I worked with, on and on, about the circumstances, we'd like to represent you. We file a case. So there's a lawsuit filed against DA, David Eister, in federal court, because, you know, it's a federal matter. And then we named Noble my former chief at the time, Buck Ganter, he was named, and then the county of Mendocino. And yeah, Noble himself. COVID, everything, it was just a disaster. For 5 years, we kind of put this case together, and at the end, the county, they won't ever say they admit guilt, but they enter into an agreement, and then that's their admission of guilt, but they will never say they're guilty, but they admitted fault. And then he did too. 99% of all the money that I got from all of the cases, I ended up having to pay the DA's fees because he was immune. But it didn't take away the fact that the principle of the matter was he was, in my mind, his behavior was more egregious than anybody, even the one that beat me, because he had the most power. He had the ability to make sure that these departments did the right thing, investigated with some integrity. So we go through that. At this point, Noble had rose the ranks very fast. So he went all the way up to chief. We came back from one of our hearings up north, and I think 2 days later, we were in court 2 days prior, I get a call saying Noble has been placed on leave. So what happens is, allegedly he committed forced oral copulation on a female. So he was on duty in uniform in his chief, vehicle. There's a ring camera that caught him going in, and then whatever happened. He left, sent her a text message saying something about, that was awkward. So I think there might be some admission of guilt there, or at least that's what's alleged. And I happen to know this because the investigator for that, it's a civil case, had contacted me and told me these things and asked if they could use, some of my discovery to just show what kind of a person he is. So, but what's interesting is the DA, still, same DA, will not file charges on him either. And what's interesting is that nobody will run against him, because in this little world, he is somebody. Outside of that world, he is a bag of shit, and he is nobody. But he has everybody convinced. I mean, he will straight tell people, if you run against me and you lose, you're fired, right? Like, people at the DA's office sometimes want to step up and try, put their hat in the ring. That man makes sure everybody knows that he will ruin their life. But what's funny is that that's what people said he would do to me. I'm still waiting. So if he would like to, I'm here. But that's the thing, is when you have the truth and you've done nothing wrong, there's nothing he could do to me, right? And so I feel like people just really need to look at the end of the day, what do they stand for? So the city really quickly puts him on leave, Noble on leave, and 2 days later he was fired. The DA will not file charges, but, the victim is suing him in federal court, and as far as I know, that's still pending. So now he sells insurance in the town that he lived, where he did these things to me and to, allegedly, this other female. So he rose all the way up. He didn't make it even a year in the chief position, and he fell flat on his face. And, part of me thinks maybe that's because he was allowed to get away with so much for so long that the community and the people that allowed him to slide, all his behaviors go unchecked, just basically boosted his confidence that this man is doing this in uniform. So, right, you and I know, you go into somebody's house, you have your firearm on, you have your peace officer, you have your uniform. If you enter that person's house with the intent to commit a felony, that's a very serious allegation. Then add on top of it, under the color of authority, being a police officer and the pressure and the things that come with that, right? And not a single person will step up and ask why he's not being prosecuted. But once my case settled, I had finally found somebody, this reporter at LA Times, but we were down here. And by the grace of God, she had the nerve to actually write this up and do something to help us. I mean, I say nerve because that's what it felt like, was like she had this courage that nobody else in our whole journey for like 6 years would do. And at the end of this case, she actually contacted me and said that she was like, she was very affected by it, and she actually has chosen a different career, and she left. She was so upset about the things she found out, because she did her due diligence, you know, to check, because they're not going to write about somebody who they cannot verify these things are true. And when she was done with her investigation and writing and seeing how things were going to go, she couldn't do it anymore. It was very moving for me, just the fact that the media started to get involved, and then now other people are like, oh, well, we want to talk to you. I'm like, well, of course you do, because you know that last incident where he got fired just substantiated everything I had been saying. So yeah, so he's selling insurance, which is probably a really great job for him because he's such a good manipulator. So I wish him well in that job.
I'm glad to hear that this at least ended on a at least some kind of good note, where you won these cases, and he's gone, and he's got another lawsuit. At least he's got things to deal with, because this is so messed up, and I think his story is so important, and people need to hear this. And you either become an advocate for other women or anyone who's been not only been abused or been involved in domestic violence, or anybody that's a police officer that has to deal with this stuff and the culture of perversion, like I've been saying here. And if anybody, I actually was looking at this number. So if anybody's a victim of like domestic violence, here's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and it's 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233 on your phones. If you've been a victim, I don't care if the guy says he's a chief, he's a mayor, he's a politician, whatever. You go, don't make yourself a statistic. That's what I'm trying to say. And unfortunately, some are no longer here to even speak. So that's the most important thing. And I applaud you. You're like, I think you're a warrior for fighting, you're not only for your freedom and all of this, but to make sure that you not only expose this, but you have to be vindicated, because you've been saying this and people think you're crazy, but you're not. And, I wish I would have known you before, because I could have helped you out on different things. And maybe there could be somebody that runs for office against this clown, because I don't know if he's a Republican or Democrat, but like anything else, when it comes to elected office, it's a crapshoot. So if this guy thinks he's got a stronghold over there as a DA, maybe he doesn't have a stronghold as strong as he thinks. So now we were mentioning the segue, right? So my segue into this is, you actually mentioned how you weren't represented for something, and yet this guy who clearly was involved in A, prohibited conduct, and B, a sexual assault, right? So in New York City right now, the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, the swagger man with no plan, he was a cop for 22 years in the NYPD. He made it all the way to captain. Of course, he wasn't really much in the street. He was a political figure even in the NYPD. So, but in 1993, he was a police sergeant, and he was part of a fraternal organization. It's called the Transit Guardians, not the NYPD Guardians. It's a fraternal organization for black officers. And he met this woman, or he knew this woman. He says, now he doesn't know her. And I think I sent you that article, and he says, I don't know her. But she claims in a lawsuit, an Adult Survivors Act, which was something that New York enacted because they were out to get Donald Trump for something, and they did. They actually got sued with this woman. The woman said he defamed her. She won in the court, which Eric Adams at that point said, we must believe all women. But then when the claim is made against him that this woman he worked with, right, she said that he assaulted her in a car, sexually assaulted in a car by telling her, look, you got to give me, whatever, some kind of oral pleasure there, and ask to do favors. So she sued him for this in civil court. Now, he says, I don't know her. That's not who I am. But the troubling thing here is in the NYPD, there's a law there in New York City, though. It's called General Municipal Law 50K2. And I know this because I was sued, too, one time. So when you get sued for something, you have to fall in the 3 guidelines for them to, you have to not make 3 things, anything but these 3 things to be covered by the city. And you have to write a letter. You have to sign a letter requesting for the law department to represent you in a lawsuit. So the 3 things are, number 1, it can't be something that doesn't, it can't, does it further along the good of the department? That's number one. Number two, if it's prohibited conduct. And number three, does it fall under the scope of your duties? Nowhere in those three provisions I just mentioned does a sexual harassment, assault, or rape fall under. None of that. So I guess raping somebody as a police officer with his on or off duty betters the department, even though it's a prohibited conduct. It doesn't. So he's being represented by the law department. The taxpayer of New York City right now is representing Eric Adams in his case. Not only him, but Timothy Pearson is deputy of the deputy mayor of public safety, the chief of department, Jeffrey Madry, on multiple sexual assault cases, the chief of patrol, the chief token paleface, John Schell, the deputy commissioner of operations, Kaz Dawdry. There's another lawsuit with this Brian Adams, who's a community director. He's a civilian who's had a checkered past. He's in multiple lawsuits, and he was in prior action in the Daily News when he worked there. There's another incident, another person involved, another police department. I forgot his name. He's in the same lawsuit with Jeffrey Madry. So here's the thing. They're representing them illegally. They're actually violating this. And how do I know this? I was sued, and I had the request for it, and they gave me back a letter. And it explains in very short detail why. So they claim that for him and his cronies that it's attorney-client privilege. But my letter is not attorney-client privilege because it's not. The city has the right to know why you're representing. There's nothing on this form that shows anything that's a court case or how we're going to defend. So you're hearing this, and I'm telling you, you have a woman that was raped in one case. She used to be a civilian that was close to Jeffrey Madry when he was a borough chief in Brooklyn. She had an office with him. She was raped. And then at this party, and she confided him what happened. He got her a sex, the sex rape kit. They went to the hospital, but somehow she was smeared by the police department, including the people that are involved in my own case. Keyshawn Sewell was a police commissioner. She's involved in this case somehow. So I'm telling you, it just grows. It's a culture of perversion. You have Eric Adams who has his own case. Timothy Pearson bullied this female and this other deputy inspector, and he's not even he was an ex-cop. Now he's just an aide. Somehow he's running this shady little unit that has no supervision, that Eric Adams just says it's a unit I created. And then he's sexually harassing this female sergeant, who then another guy sued him, a sergeant, saying, you derailed my career because you wanted to sexually harass women in his office. He was told that he wasn't allowed to be in this office by himself. This is the same guy who assaulted a female security guard at a migrant shelter and had her arrested and the charges were dropped. But he assaulted her. Then we have Madry, who's involved in that case because he covered that one up. And in this other case where he smeared this woman because nobody knew that she had been raped. Only him and two guys in a special unit. So you hear all of this, right? What is your take as a former cop, as a victim of domestic violence, as somebody who's been absolutely ruined by the system, hearing that, again, the highest people in New York City from the police department and the mayor and his office and his little goon office are getting away with this kind of behavior, and there's all kinds of lawsuits coming. What do you have to say for this, or your take on all of this?
I mean, I'm ashamed for that department and the people that live in the jurisdiction that they patrol and they represent. And it goes much higher, right? Because like you said, it goes all the way up the chain, the political chain, and it's like there is no stop. It's funny because you said the part about being represented. There's a point where there are so many people who are turning a blind eye to what's happening, which I feel like I get where they're at, because I've also been in situations like you're mentioning, or like my situation. I remember what it was like before I was a victim of domestic violence, and there were times where even I, as a human, would be like, well, I don't know, maybe she's just this or that. But in these situations where you have so many people coming forward, and it sounds like there's a good deal of evidence and there's prior behavior, and their conduct is just, people are turning a blind eye. The people who are turning the blind eye are just as culpable. And if anything, more, because they were kind of outside of the circle of the political arena, right? Maybe they're just observing it and they're part of the department. I feel like their ability to go and say something is going to carry more weight than almost somebody that's even closer to the circle. It's really hard to wrap my head around, but also, like you were saying, my situation is to wrap my head around how this is allowed to happen, and so publicly. This is in the media, right? So in my situation, it was just this quiet little town that nobody cared about. Nobody even knew what was happening, and they could easily ignore it. In this situation, in this department, and all of these people, I don't know, like you asked me, how are people not speaking up and demanding justice or some kind of accountability? But then I guess the question then comes down to what happened in my case. Who is going to hold them accountable? Who is the actual, what entity is investigating this? Or how is it allowed to happen? It's 2024. Everything's on tape. There's, you know what I mean? The cameras. How are we as a society ignoring this? It blows my mind. I actually don't even have the words for it. It reminds me a lot of what I went through, just on my situation was a smaller scale. But in retrospect, like, it was that big for me because it was my world, right? And my world was crumbling. So it's just, I don't know, having been through something that all I needed was one person. I think one person could have made my situation bearable, or could have ended it, would have ended it, had the right people knew about it and had the guts to say something. And I don't know, that's shameful.
I think it's just a travesty. I see a lot in your situation with what's going on right now in New York City with the biggest police department in the world, the NYPD. And I'll tell you there's more. So the head of the law department, which is the corporation counsel, Stephanie Riddix Hindix, her name is, or Radix Hindix. So now apparently Eric Adams, who's the head of the New York City, he could do what he wants. It's one of his agencies. He basically told her, I want to get rid of her and replace her with this other prosecutor. Well, he was a former federal prosecutor who represented Governor Christie in New Jersey in that Bridgegate scandal. So he's good at covering things up. So she wants to replace her with him. And the reason this happened is reported by the New York Post is the fact that she went back to Eric. Now, mind you, I filed a FOIA request on where is this 50K2 letter? Where is the reasoning for them to indemnify him and represent him? They gave me a thing that said there is no letter, there's nothing, and we don't have to tell you anything, basically. Which is, they can't even, you have to sue them, I guess, for it. But I was the very first to do it. Then the Daily News, everybody else piled in after. And now it was referenced in the article that she said to Eric Adams that this was very problematic. Why? Because it's illegal. It's official misconduct. And the second part is, she said, is another legal matter, which I believe is something else. The fact that I also sent you this nightclub restaurant that it's like kind of like the Raven nightclub, where you mentioned these guys drink together. These guys all hang out at this place called Concha Frito in the Bronx. It's owned by the police commissioner's brother, and the manager creator of the place is a guy who's a mob associate and a self-admitted criminal who has a history of running places that even Major League Baseball banned their players from going to. The guy is notorious, and he's no business hanging out with any police department, let alone the guy knows the attorney general, the district attorney. He knows all the high players in the Democratic Party who run the state. And they all huddle up in this place at Concha Frito with the police department, and all these guys involved in this culture of perversion are also frequenters and patronizers of Concha Frito, which, by the way, admitted in their own paperwork that their public safety hazard and a fire trap. They ran the place illegally. They have some fire shed, like a party room where they have all their parties. I mean, it's just, the corruption is up to your eyeballs. You're like, how is this happening in New York City? And that's where they basically hang out and do all these dirty deeds. I mean, now I sent you the other article that happened just the other day. 2 New York City cops picked up a drunk woman at Zona de Cuba that's owned by Fernando Mateo, friend of Eric Adams, and this gentleman, the 2 people involved in the Concha Frito nightclub. And He's one of the owners there, Fernando Mat. And these two guys picked up a woman who was basically almost unconscious drunk, which means the state liquor authority who gives you the liquor license, number one, they admitted there was an investigation on Consafrito, yet they said that the findings they're not going to tell you about. They didn't shut them down. They had 6 public meetings this year, nothing on the agenda for it. And now this place, should they have a liquor license on it? This woman was picked up drunk, beyond drunk, doesn't know where she is. They take her home or whatever, and now the prosecutor's saying that this woman's saying that they raped her, and they were talking about them raping her, and there's DNA evidence. So they had to indict these 2 cops. And this one of the cops, the year before, 2 years before, they said grab the woman at the Yankee Stadium, but they had to drop that charge. Of course, it's in the Bronx. This is where Eddie Caban, I mean, the whole thing with the Bronx is where everything happens in the Bronx, apparently. So these 2 cops now are getting indicted for the culture of perversion. They took this girl home in a place that shouldn't have a liquor license, which, by the way, Eric Adams had his State of the City party there. So that means all the Consafrito guys went to Zona de Cuba, because now they can't hang out over there right now because they're in the spotlight and they're in a lawsuit with me and other lawsuits. So now they're going to Zona de Cuba, which now women get raped coming out of there, get fed all this alcohol. Do you have any... So can you wrap your head around this? What do you have to say about any of this? Do you have any take on this? You're a former cop who's a victim of this insanity of what these guys are doing. What do you have to say of hearing something like this? You would probably think this happens in a small town. You keep saying your town is small. But this is New York City, the Bronx.
And that's the thing. It's so public. There's so many people that know this stuff is happening. And is it that they just don't know how to go about it to get somebody's attention? Do they not want to? But also, who will stop it? So I know in my situation, the Attorney General I tried to contact, because I had a relationship with judges, DAs outside the county, because I worked with the Attorney General's office when I was at the DA's office. So I had contacts everywhere. The judges at the local Superior Court were meeting with me and telling me, do not give up, this DA is corrupt. The judges, but even them, they sit on the bench where it can be very problematic if your DA challenges you as the judge, right? So there's so many, it's like incestuous, this whole like web of deceit and just, I literally don't even have the words. I don't know where the malfunction is. We know this shouldn't happen. Taxpayer money is being spent at alarming rates, I know. At least in my city, it was. Like, what actually caused that action to go that far? I'm wondering, is it because of the SART test, the sexual assault test, where, now you have like a nurse and a doctor or other people that are now getting involved a little bit more removed from the circle? Are they not able to keep the lid on it? So in my county, very similar, I'm sure, there's like the ringleader who has a lot to cover, and then he has his minions covering it for him because they all have shit on each other.
When I mentioned these clowns up top, we call them I had a nickname, the Three Payaso, which would be Eric Adams, Philip Banks, and Timothy Pearson. But you extend the whole family onto these other guys I mentioned that were involved in all this other stuff. If I'm a cop, I'm saying, well, I either know these guys or I'm watching them. Nothing happens to them, so I might as well test the waters too, because that's kind of how it is on that job also. You go, oh, well, he can do it. I can do it, right? They got away with it. They're getting away with it, whatever they're doing. They're involved in all these lawsuits that are all – it's disgusting behavior. It's a culture perversion. I would say that Eric Adams, who already has federal investigations, there's all kinds of straw donor stuff going on. I mean, it's just a mess. New York City is a mess. He's run it worse than ever. He is the best-dressed mayor since Jimmy Walker, the most corrupt mayor since William O'Dwyer, and the most incompetent mayor since Bill de Blasio of New York City. And if this guy, I mean, for me, I think he should step down. But, of course, he would lose all his cover because I think there's so much smoke here that there's a fire. And he keeps saying where there's smoke, there's not fire necessarily. I mean, this guy is just, he thinks he was ordained by God to be the mayor 30 years ago. I don't know where he gets his intelligence from, but clearly I think there's a culture or a cult of perversion here. And unfortunately, these two cops who did a criminal act are just seeing what these guys are doing. They're getting a look at them. They're getting they're getting away with murder. Chief Madry has been in 3 cases now, sexual assault or harassment or rape. And Kaz Dordry was his driver. Now he's a deputy commissioner of operations. So he drove him to that other case that I actually sent the article, the first one he was involved with, another female cop. So you have to understand, it's always female cops involved. There's always females involved. There's always a coworker. So what are these guys doing when they're not with coworkers? Because they hang out in these shady places where you hear all kinds of crazy allegations. And you said the same thing before. You were mentioning how your fiance, the ex-fiance, who's a creep and a I mean, the guy should be in jail for what he did. He hangs out with the same kind of circle, and they go out and do the same things. So it's not me. See, it just you don't hear about it's just going on not only in New York City. It happened in her department. It's going on in Los Angeles. It's going on in Houston, Texas. It's going on everywhere. There's as I say it, there's a consofrito in your town.
And here we're in a state of a crisis for lack of having police officers and qualified individuals, and we need good people in this profession, but anybody who has a sound mind and any wits about them is going to know by seeing and hearing these things, they don't want to get involved in it because I was told very early on in my career, it's like there's this White Castle and it's really hard to get up and through the doors, right? Because everybody's like, well, you got to be this upstanding citizen and you couldn't have, committed a petty theft when you were 4. I mean, you know what I mean? Like the standards they put in place that they want to hold you accountable for before you're an officer, all of that goes out the window once you make it through the White Castle. And then nothing is checked. There's no checks and balances. There's nobody held accountable. And then you wonder why nobody wants to be a police officer. Why does nobody want to put themselves in that position and be a part of this corruption? It's just so many things need to change. It's not a crisis for getting recruits and having. There's always going to be people who believe in doing the right thing, and being a police officer is very appealing. There's some good things about it, but unless the culture that you're talking about changes and this political, just like incestuous, just twisted, I don't even know, but it's so disgusting. They're never going to get people that want to join the police department or the sheriff's department or any other department because everybody knows this is happening and nothing's being done about it. And that part's disturbing. For me, it could almost justify because we were such a small piece of the world that nobody cared about, right? Nobody even knows where it's at. It's so small and just kind of independent from everything. But you're talking about this big city, big people. I mean, I looked today, some of the people you were talking about, there was an article 8 hours ago published. They are very much in the forefront in the media. But I think what it is that people are so scared because they know from seeing the corruption among other officers and other politicians, right? So they're like, well, I got to feed my family. I have a retirement I'm going to lose. What am I going to do after this? These are all the same things that I had to face, right? I had to cash out my retirement to survive because I left without a job because I had to. But then I had to fight like heck to get my career to be given a chance for the state, but yet I had done nothing wrong but be a victim. But still, you know what I mean? It's like this revolving just cycle. Yeah, and it's just blows my mind. But yeah, I hope at some point, if anybody, and men also, right? There's men officers who are victims of domestic violence, and they're even less likely to speak up. But I'm almost hoping that if they are, that maybe the female coworkers or people are supporting them. It's such a complicated situation, but I think the departments need to put things in place for situations like mine. I didn't know what an IA even was. They didn't even talk to us about that prep your people and educate them about what to do in situations that are real life that they're going to come up with, right? But then you have to hold people accountable all the way up. So you can't, it's mind-blowing. Absolutely.
Don't worry, in New York City, Internal Affairs was sponsoring these parties at that place, by the way. They sponsored the final party that had them get them all in trouble with the landlord and finally get the judge to rule that they can't have that party shed. They sponsored a party there. That's to show you what's going on there.
One story, real quick, the taxpayers of Mendocino County and Ukiah don't realize is there was very similar, but on a smaller scale, a Christmas party. My ex, Noble, and the chiefs, former chiefs, future chiefs, everybody's here in these photos, and I'm taking these pictures and I'm videoing this. They dressed up as a theme for the Christmas party they call it like the terrorist outfit. They brought a goat, my goat. I owned a goat, right? Because I lived in the county and the country. They dressed up as terrorists. They put turbans on these things. They took what they thought they were trying to, kind of resemble Osama bin Laden. They took charcoal, put all over their face, wore these, like the garb, did this, paraded a goat in a restaurant. This is taxpayers' money. Drinking, all of the head official, everybody there. Not a person stood by. Nobody said a single word. Noble sat up there and just thought he was so funny. And it just blows my mind. Like, is that the kind of stuff that we as a community, as a society are okay with? And here I sent that stuff. I thought, if nobody cares about me being a victim of domestic violence, maybe they'll care about this, right? Like getting any angle to get any kind of attention to what's happening, not even just with me, and nobody would touch it. And I just, that's just a small example of the things that happen every day that people are blind to, I think. And they need to understand that obviously they're not going to show this part of them because then they would be in trouble and the community won't stand by. So people need to realize that what you see is not what you get always. Most of the time.
The parties she's talking about, parties like this, we A, don't know if there's any discounted meals, B, if there's this kind of liquor. At Concha Frito, these are the allegations you're hearing, and the same thing could be happening. I told you, there's a Concha Frito in your town. You just got to find it. It's somewhere there. And with these guys, it's party all the time. I mean, that's all they care about. Like, I don't get it. It really... it's like a misguided way of going through life, So listen. This has been amazing, Amanda. I don't usually go this long. The reason I went long is I wanted your whole story. I want women to hear your voice. I want people that have been a victim to hear you. Also, your opinion matters because you got to keep an eye on things like what's going on in New York City, because what happened to you and in your town is happening elsewhere. And people need to root out corruption, because this should be, I'm not saying we're going to have a perfect world, but you at least want to know that everybody's on an even playing field, which we're clearly not. And some police officers and some police departments are just run the way we're saying. And it's just, that's what, corruption roots out. I mean, absolute corruption corrupts absolutely. That's what they say. So this is a case where it's got to stop, and people need to be people who are in charge need to start being held accountable. So Amanda, where could people follow you, or maybe if you have your own show or anything on YouTube, you could let everyone know where to find you at.
So I haven't started my own YouTube channel, but I'm appearing on other people's, like this one, and a co-host on the Prime Initiative. So I have an Instagram. The handle is at Bras and Laws. I don't know if maybe you could link it or whatnot, but anybody can contact me through social media. I have Facebook. It's under Bras and Laws, or you can look me up by my name. I'm pretty visible, or trying to be, right? Because I do want people to know that if I could be the person that I wish I had, like, contact me. I'll do my best to help. And a lot of people have, and hopefully it helps them, but also it helps me, because then it feels like what I went through was not for nothing, right? And yeah, it wasn't for nothing, and there's some good that can come from it. And it really is worth it when you get on the other side of it. Everything that could have went wrong did go wrong, and I'm still sitting here today and saying I would do it all over again if it meant coming out on this end feeling like the sense of doing the right thing is what the police department and those officials should be feeling like, and they're not. I feel like that today because I have done the right thing all along, and it's very possible. It's scary, but it is possible, and hopefully, you know, you have a case, right?
Yeah, I'm still fighting because you know, your First Amendment matters. Freedom of associations matter, and basically if you're not doing anything criminal, or the guy you're allegedly, supposedly associating with as your friend isn't, you shouldn't be held to any crazy standard that these guys are trying to say that I did something wrong, because they're doing everything wrong. Usually when they point a finger at you, it's really, they got to point it at themselves.
Yeah, it's a distraction. It's like you said, setting the fire and everybody's going to look over at the smoke. Meanwhile, the whole department and the house, whatever it is burning and everybody's looking at the smoke. And it works so far. So people need to speak up. Yeah. Nah. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being on, Amanda. This has been, it's been an honor to have you on. I think you have a very bright future. I definitely I'm going to follow everything you do. I hope everybody that's listening and watching does the same. And I want you to stay strong. You're going to become somebody who is an advocate for people. This kind of stuff, it can't be tolerated. And, you know, people need to, when you hear this, if you know something, you see something like that number, I'm going to actually say it again, 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233. If you're a victim of domestic violence or you know something going on, just call that number. Because listen, if you call your own police department, you might get this character showing up who likes to cover everything up with his DA friend. So you can't, we can't have that. And I just want to we're going to emphasize corruption must be rooted out. So, Amanda, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your story and then giving your insight on the corruption that, I mean, New York City is, I don't know what to say. I really pray for the nation and that city. And with that being said, guys, thanks. If you like what you heard, you can click the links below and hit the subscribe button. Spread the word out. If you're listening on Apple or podcast, or you're listening on Spotify, same thing. Give me a like, subscribe. And with that being said, everybody, it's been an honor. I'm definitely glad I had Amanda on, and we'll definitely see you on the next one. So over and out.